Welcome guys to my Manhwa video. Today I'm going to be going over 5 fighting Manhwa you should check out. If you're new here and enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. And it's good to mention that all these Manhwa, or 4 out of these 5 Manhwa I'm going to be mentioning, can be found on the app Webtoons. So, hope you enjoyed, and let's see the intro. So we all know of the good fighting manga, but in Manhwa it's a different story. It took quite a bit of research to find 5 that I really enjoyed and that I felt worthy of putting in this video. So here we have 5 Manhwa. First up, I'm going to go with a new Manhwa by the name of Boxer. So as we know, it's boxing based, so it's martial arts. All these Manhwa are going to be martial arts, so fighting, martial arts, same thing pretty much. That's the basis of my criteria for this list. So the first one is a new one. As I mentioned, the name was Boxer, so it's boxer based throughout the story. It features somewhat like 3 main characters. The art is okay and it's very strong, showing the impact of the punches. It's new and not that long so far. Only 8 chapters are currently released in English Translate. It may be a bit ahead. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit ahead for the Raws version, but currently translations are up to 8 chapters. It's high school based, so most of the main characters, or 3 of the main characters, are high school students, but there are some other older characters, such as the old man who's looking for someone to train. From what I know of, it's weekly chapters on Webtoon getting released. It's highly rated so far. It's been exploding on the Webtoon website, being one of the top rated things thus far that I've seen in the recent times. And the story so far, which is pretty much the strongest route, has been very engaging. Many manhwa tend to, after time or near the start time, to get boring and they drag out a lot of stuff. And sometimes I don't really want to get into the next chapter like I do with many manga. But for this, the Boxer, I just go straight into the next chapter. Read the first 8 chapters in like one sitting easily and just wanted to see more and more. So with the 3 main characters, there's one, the idea of worthlessness, no skill and extreme drive and want to improve. That's one character. Then the next one, a genius with immense skill and drive, but doesn't, want to better himself. Just wants to, torture other people or pretty much beat up other people with his immense skill and, drive, but he doesn't want to care for others or develop as a person. And the last one, a monster with no drive. You can take it how it is. It's kind of, interesting to see how these 3 concepts or ideals match together. And this is only all presented in the first 8 chapter, which is great. And all the characters, even though we haven't got much development, we've got some development for one character. Like 8 chapters, we've already got some pretty good development for one character. The idea of worthlessness, no skill, extreme drive, want for improve, so and so. And the monster, which is pretty intense to see. It's not a literal monster, but the idea of monster is implemented as well. And from what I've seen so far, it seems to be on a realistic grounded level, but has shown signs of going to the extreme unrealistic level in the recent chapters. So as a whole, the Boxer is by far the shortest on the list and probably my most enjoyable for the first 8 chapters compared to the others. So if you had to check out one out of this whole list, I highly recommend the Boxer. The next manhwa goes by the name Girls of the Wild. The base of the story is after 42 years, a girls-based martial arts school has its first year accepting males, with only one male who is pretty much the protagonist of the story joining this all-girls school. The Wild League, which is the base of the school and what goes on around the world, is a teenage fighting martial arts leagues where teenage girls challenge each other to their limits in, the battle to the death or martial arts based UFC type fighting arena things. The genres of the manhwa include action, comedy, martial arts, harem, and ecchi. And the ecchi moments are there, but they're not hardcore. And the fan service is there as well, but it's not the main focus of the story, and it's not very common. But there is features of that if that's not for you, or if that is for you. If you want to see, waifus going at each other, fighting with some fan service mode, this is the perfect manhwa for you. You have the ancient game, the greatest game of choose your waifu throughout the story, which is a perfect way to get into the series. And the male protagonist finds himself in the middle of this battlefield. The character development throughout the story is evident. The story is probably the strongest suit, and it has some very fun and light-hearted moments, and it does have some boring, I will mention, it does have some boring and pointless parts that kind of really hard to read and get kind of repetitive, and you just can't be bothered reading it. But it does have some twists as well, which, you know, keeps you wanting to see more. All the characters, or all the main characters, even some of the supporting characters is good. I can't really fault any of the characters you see, except for like maybe some we see for like 1 or 2 chapters. And the story has currently ended with a total of 264 chapters. It does feature the martial arts, the fighting and all that, but near the start it's kind of slow. It doesn't really get into this until later. So as a whole, compared to many of the other manhwa on this list, this is least focused on martial arts in the early stages, but does have a lot of feature of that later on, which is good to see. The next manhwa is probably the most popular one on today's video, and that's God of High School. As we know, it's getting an anime adaptation in the next season, so you probably could lay off of reading the manhwa, but if you want to get into the manhwa after reading or after watching the anime, you could just check out here. Or if you want to, you know, just read the first part of the manhwa to get ready for the anime, or if you're just interested in watching the anime. So it begins with a fighting tournament to seek out who's the strongest among all the high school students in Korea. Mori Jin-ae, our protagonist in the first part I'll get into later, is a taekwondo specialist and a high school student. Soon learns that there's something much greater beneath the stage of the tournament. As we know, so the first major big tournament is probably the highlight of the series thus far, which will most likely be what's covered in the first season of the anime, which I'm most hyped for. There's a total of 468 chapters and it's still ongoing, so it's quite a bit of material to get through. It's very fun and engaging. The fight and the art's a great treat for manhwa level that is. It's, as I mentioned, the most popular on this list, and it has the most chapters and the most content on this list. The whole first part all the way up to the end of the, you know, first major big tournament is like greatness, pure greatness. I'll have to compare it to Kangen level tournament greatness, maybe a bit below that if you know of Kangen Ashra, Kangen Mega, all that greatness. I would even compare the top tournament moments to that level of greatness. But after that, it does start to diminish and go into, you know, the manhwa rip zone, where it's kind of this, you know, stretched out and kind of just wanting to make money from it, and this, you know, the story isn't as good as it was, but still it's pretty good, better than most other fighting anime. Even after it's, you know, big high going downhill from there, it's still very engaging, and I know some people who still enjoy that end part as well. So there you go. If you want to check out the God of High School, there it is. The next manhwa on this video goes by the name of Gosu. The basis of the story. So following his mentor's death, his protege Gang Yong makes it his life purpose to avenge those who wronged his mentor. So when his mentor dies, he goes to complete his revenge to find that those who wronged his master in the past were already dead and had been dead for many years. With this being the premise of the story, it's actually quite comedic and funny, thinking that a kid, he was pretty much trained by this, you know, god of martial arts, god of fighting, his mentor, for these years in the hope that he will eventually get revenge for the wrongs that happened to his master. And then once, you know, his master died, gonna finally go out for his revenge, he finds out that, you know, all everyone's dead. You don't even know to go for the revenge. There's no revenge needed because they're already dead. He's like, oh shit. And you know, he does? He becomes a, you know, a godly dumpling delivery boy. The manhwa doesn't go down the realistic route when it comes to martial arts, but it does have a foundation of martial arts, and it does start with a lot more light-hearted stuff going around the story, but later on, let me tell you, it does get dark. The protagonist is somewhat overpowered near the start. He does get a lot of character development, and the story does start off with the background of the, you know, basis of the story, with the protagonist's mentor being considered one of the strongest martial artists in the world, and then his history, what wrongs happened to him, and then so on so. And then the protagonist is dreaming of, you know, the dumplings and all that. Many of the early chapters don't have the best art, and I think even near the end, I'm not 100% caught up. I'm like in the hundreds of chapters, I'm very close to caught up, but from what I've seen, most of the background characters don't have faces, which is quite odd to me, and kind of, you know, doesn't make me feel the best when all the background characters have, you know, non-plain empty faces, kind of weird looking. And the story seems to be based in a feudal era of fighting. It's more shonen-esque than most other things on this list, probably next to God of High School. The fights are good. I kind of lost interest with much of the non-fighting dialogue, with the fights in this series being the absolute highlight. The story as a whole, it has some comedic, has some cool moments, but not really my favorite thing. The darker moments are good, but still not really my favorite thing. More of the fighting is, you know, much better. The amount of detail and how the art changes and evolves over time is great to see, and there is fighting with weapons throughout the story as it's commonplace as well, which is good to note. The best component with the fights is most likely the motion and impact shown with the art, with its being its strongest suit, and very good to see. and it's currently a total of 178 chapters and still ongoing at the recording of this video. Now the last manhwa I'm going to be talking about in today's video is another popular one, but it's quite older than many of the others on this list. It goes by the name of The Breaker. It has finished with a total of 72 chapters and it ran from 2007 to 2010. It's quite different to the other manhwa on this video. It could be considered a manga slash manhwa hybrid. It's made by Korean authors and released in a Korean magazine, which makes it a manhwa, but you read it like a manga. It's in black and white. As we know, many of the manhwa or all the manhwa on this list are in color. This is black to white and you read it like a normal manga. As for manhwa, you read it like regular English stuff pretty much, but for manga you read it the opposite way. So you know, it's like manga pretty much, but it's pretty much a manga, but it's made by Korean authors, so it's a manhwa, I guess. So there you go. So without going into generic stuff about the story, this is a little summary of the story. So a Chad teacher becomes a master of a non-Chad protagonist until that one Chad protagonist turns into a Chad himself. That is the mysterious Weeb's, ultimate summary of the story. As a whole, it involves heavy use of a secret martial arts world, which is somewhat similar to the one in Kangen, with its own government laws and so on. So it has a lot of development for the protagonist, from a non-Chad to a Chad. That's the best type of story we can hope for. The art is very comparable to many of the well-done manga, with art being this fantastic throughout. Fighting is used on a more unrealistic level with the use of ki throughout the later parts of the story, but it does have a core foundation of martial arts and martial arts use throughout the whole story. And it also is a sequel manga to the story going by the name of The Breaker New Waves. But there you go, that's an older manga, a total of 72 chapters as I mentioned, a chatty story. All these are pretty much chatty stories. And yet that's 5 fighting slash martial arts manhwa for you to check out. If I had to rank them from my favorite thus far or ones you should check out the most. So number 1, The Boxer. Number 2, probably The Breaker. I'll go number 2, God of High School. Number 3, The Breaker. Number 4, Girls of the Wild. And then number 5, Gosu. So there you go. If you have checked out or read any of these manhwa already, make sure to let me know your comments down in the description. I most likely will be making more content on the God of High School once the anime starts airing, so stay tuned for that if you're interested in any of that. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe, join the Discord if you want to talk more about all this great manhwa, and that's it guys. Peace.